Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. I am so excited to have you all here and to share with you the conclusion of what has been a couple of different episodes. We are going to go over what I call the last section of auto mode, or adjusting your smart cycles in auto mode. This is the continuation of the conversation we started in I think episode 5, where we talked about adjusting your run times in auto mode. And then we continued that on when we talked about adjusting your frequency in auto mode. So when we talk about adjusting your stations in auto mode, we are talking about the depletion model, right? How does WeatherTrack generate an irrigation schedule? Well, we think that underneath every station there's a glass of water, and the growing condition for your plant is adequate as long as that glass of water is totally full, and the growing condition for your plant is adequate until that glass of water is at most half full, right? At most, depletion we can allow is 50%. And so 50% is our maximum allowable depletion. When we calculate that we have crossed that 50% mark, that's when WeatherTrack will prompt irrigation and fill that glass of water back up. So our conversation around the program settings for auto mode really revolve around this science, kind of what goes into calculating how fast water is depleting and calculating how best to return that water back into the soil. So when we talk about the automated by WeatherTrack, we talk about how to manage or how WeatherTrack will optimize how often, how much, and how best to irrigate your site to make sure that we are keeping that balance in the soil, to make sure that we're keeping your plants healthy and safe without using more water than we need, eliminating the water waste out of the irrigation schedule. And so today we're really going to focus on how best, because we've already talked about how often and how much. We've got just a few things to cover, and they're all the little pieces in between that kind of get overlooked in the big conversation. So what we're going to do today is we're going to actually burn through all of the different things that WeatherTrack considers when generating a runtime. And we're going to go through in order the questions that you're asked on the auto mode program setup. And we're going to talk about each one of those things, really comparing new settings, the ones we haven't talked about, to the ones that we have previously covered. The ones that we previously covered are obviously the big ones that take a lot of time to talk about. And I'm just going to lean on previous trainings to kind of cover those things keep it super high level today, and refer back to those trainings that we've already done. So we're going to focus on the station name and the program and the things that we really haven't gone into. So by the end of today, we will have talked about all of the different things that WeatherTrack considers when generating a runtime in auto mode. All right, so to kick this off, we are going to talk about station name, and for my money, this is a way underused tool. I see a lot of times where folks are just ignoring the station name and leaving this as station 1. And I think that that is underselling the value of creating that controller chart, right? When I was in my certified water manager training, the first thing they teach you is make a map, make a controller chart, don't waste water looking for where the water is running, right? And so we've made this super easy. We've integrated it into the app. Please don't leave it as station 1. That is the default. Go through and document where that station comes up in the field. Talk about it in cardinal directions. Talk about it in landmarks. I always use landmarks because I'm not good at north, south, east, and west. But it has to be important to you. It has to be a direction that you can walk to that station and then turn the water on to save that extra water from going down the gutter when you're just checking the system. Questions about station name? Now one's pretty straightforward. Check the questions. Oh, and we're back. Next, we want to talk about program. All right. So in program, for every station, you will assign a station to a program. And with the LC 6, 12, and 18 controller, the controller comes with 2 programs. The larger LC comes with 24, or the larger LC that has 24, 30, or 36 stations comes with 4 separate programs. And then all of the Pro 3 and LC controllers have 8 programs. And a controller program only dictates when a station is allowed to irrigate. So I would go into my days and times and say program A is going to start at 10 p.m. and has an 8-hour water window and is only allowed to water on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then when I assign a station to that program, that tells the controller that that station has to live inside those program restrictions. So the only thing that the program setting for a station does is tie it to the program in days and times and control when that station is allowed to irrigate. The only thing that we want to highlight about this is the ability to stack or overlap. And on the Pro 3 and LC controllers, we do have the ability to run multiple programs at the same time. So if your controller is set to stack, all of your programs will tie to a single start time and water window. And your controller will only run one station at a time inside that designated window. When you change the controller setting from stack to overlap, the controller knows 2 things. First of all, it knows that each program can have its own start time and water window. In addition, it knows if there's time shared in those 2 programs, that the controller has the capacity to run both of those programs at the same time. So be careful when you're doing this. This is something that is great. It's an amazing time-saving method. It's a great way to find more hours in the night to irrigate if you're battling those water window alerts. To run multiple stations at a time is a very handy thing to be able to do. It's also kind of dangerous. You got to know that you're not overtaxing the system by running too much at the same time. So make sure to program in a way that you're not going to overlap too many stations and run too much, because your pressure will be affected. But if you're looking for a quick and easy way to get more water down and be able to manage those water windows, overlapping programs is a great way to do it. Obviously with OptiFlow, that kind of mentality is built in. We're already running multiple stations to optimize the program. All right, questions on that? Nope, moving on. All right, so this is where we get into stuff we have already seen. When we talk about station mode, we talk about how a station generates runtime, and there's 4 different ways: automated by WeatherTrack, user no ET, user with ET, and off. We talked about those in episode 16, user with ET, with my friend Tom Radin out of Las Vegas. So if you're looking for more information on that, definitely check out that episode. Brings us to use water window. This admittedly, I think, is a dated piece of our software. This dates back to the ET Plus, for those of you who have been with us that long. And with the ET Plus, we didn't really have 8 programs to play with. We were very limited on our program capacity. So we had this feature where if you wanted to save valuable watering hours, like if your water restriction said that you could only water your overhead irrigation during nighttime hours, but you wanted to water your drip irrigation during the day, back in the day, you could elect on a station by station basis to kick those stations out of the water window. Now, with 8 programs, all we do is put those on a different program and control that program with much more detail. So I definitely think today's solution is a little bit better. This still exists for those of you who want to use it. But in my eyes, use water window, yes, is always the answer. Just make sure that you've got a water window for your program that works for that type of irrigation. All right, this is the one that I get the most questions about, a station setting called usable rainfall. And the way that I think about usable rainfall is, I think, should this controller listen to the rain sensor? Yes or no, right? If the controller should listen to the rain sensor and use the pause that either the rain sensor, the Weather Track Climate Center rain pause, or a user rain pause would initiate, then it should be set to use rain pause 100%. That's the default. That says this station for sure should pause when the controller is paused. However, we have a great ability to ignore that in certain applications, right? I see this often if you have a station that's not going to receive water from the sky, if it's in a greenhouse or under an underpass, and one station is going to stay dry even if it rains, we want that station to irrigate anyway. So we switch from usable rainfall 100% to usable rainfall none. That says, even if the controller gets a pause from the rain sensor or any other rain pause, we want to irrigate that one station anyway. And I see this most commonly in new plantings, right? Contractors are going to say, I want this to water come rain or shine. And so they will change the usable rainfall setting to none. So even if it rains, they're watering that new sod or that new seed in. Another piece of the puzzle that is often confusing to people is these intermediate steps, the 25, 50, and 75%. Again, that carries over with us from the days of the ET Plus. And really what happens is this created a lot more questions, even back in the days of the ET Plus. I think when we went to Pro 2, they said that all of these would equal none. So there's not actually levels of usable rainfall available anymore. Any setting other than 100% is viewed as none. So usable rainfall, should I use that rain sensor if there's a pause? 100% says yes, none says no. Anything other than 100% says no as well. All right, questions on that? Oh, I got a question on the last one. Is there an alarm when a zone exceeds the program water window? Back to the water window question, the alert will be a water window alert that will tell you that the stations have been adjusted to fit in the water window, but the programs are designed to stop when the water window closes. So no irrigation should be happening outside of the scheduled water window. All right, on to the next thing. We've already covered sprinkler type, right? We covered this in episode 5 with my friend Chad Sutton, who I'm thinking about. If you're watching me out there, Chad Sutton, we covered adjusting your run times in that episode. And that's really one of the big things that contractors ask about when you're managing these stations. I need a little bit more time or a little bit less time. We talked about all those details, how sprinkler type plays a role in that, and your sprinkler type sets the advanced settings of precip rate and efficiency. Then we looked at the details of precip rate, which again, we covered in that episode 5, adjusting your run times in auto mode. But we talked about how precip rate reflects the speed at which we're laying down water. How many inches of water is delivered into the target area in 1 hour's time. So if you have a 1.7 precip rate, that means we've got 1.7 inches of water delivered into the target area in 1 hour. And this makes it possible to calculate run times. We know how fast we're delivering water. We know how long we need to run those sprinklers to deliver the right amount. We also talked about sprinkler efficiency, how well designed, how well built, how well maintained is that irrigation system? Do you have things like head-to-head coverage, which are industry standard? We talked about the key principle that when you're adjusting these both precip rate and efficiency, there's an inverse relationship. By turning down the efficiency, we turn up the runtime. A less efficient irrigation system needs to water longer to deliver the right amount of water. All right, we're on to soil type. Now, this is when we switched into episode 14 with my friend Brady Pitcher. And Brady and I talked about all of the different ways that WeatherTrack hones in on how often we need to irrigate your sites to keep your plants healthy. And soil type is a paramount part of that. We got into kind of the absorption coefficients and all of the nerdy stuff. In fact, I talked to Tony Monzone about this after we were done, and I appreciate that. But soil type is key to your frequency. We also talked about the principle of cycle and soak in that episode, right? We never want to deliver more water in an irrigation program than your soil can absorb at one time. Or we're going to be sending water down the gutter. And that is the very heart of the smart cycle conversation, right? When we talk about how best to apply water, that cycle and soak is a key part. We want to apply all the water that your plants need and never more than your soil can absorb. That brings us to plant type. We talked about crop coefficient. We talked about how we make plant type for sprinkler techs, and you don't have to be a horticulturist to kind of figure out what category your plants go in. And plant type is really the key factor in how often a station will irrigate. The different types of plants use different amounts of water, pull different amounts of water out of the soil. And so the plant type controls how much water is left in that soil and how often we need to irrigate. Root depth, we talked about the glass of water underneath every station, and the root depth is the size of the glass that we're talking about. And we talked about this in a lot of detail in that episode 14, adjusting your irrigation frequency. That's a good one, talking about how long-term changing the root depth doesn't change the amount of water that gets delivered to a station, only the frequency and duration of each individual irrigation event. All right, we're on to microclimate. This is something that probably should have been fit into that frequency conversation as well, because when we're talking about microclimate, we're talking about how much sun does a station get? How much sun exposure is there? Obviously, a station in full sun burns through more water than a station in full shade. In fact, 35% more water, if you're looking at the math. And so we want to capture that, right? Not only for the water bill savings, but to encourage that deep and infrequent watering that WeatherTrack prides itself on, right? Get the water down and leave it at the root depth that we want so those roots continue to grow down. Don't overwater those shaded plants because that will encourage shallow rooting and not deliver on the promise of better water management, right? So I would say 8 out of 10 times I see stations in full sun, because when you're programming a station, you have to look at the entire station and identify the piece of station that is in greatest demand, the thirstiest part of your station. So if you have a station that even 3/4 of it is covered in full shade, but you have that one corner that is in full sun, we have to set that to full sun because our primary job is to keep that turf looking good. And if we set it to shady all day, it would be receiving 35% less water than it needs. So a lot of times I see this set to sunny all day, but if you want to really dial it in, this is a great way of saving more water. And then slope. This is my favorite one in this conversation because slope really highlights that smart cycle. The slope setting affects only the cycle and soak of a station. It never adjusts the total runtime. But we want to identify the steepest slope on our station so we don't send water where we don't want it to go. We want to only deliver as much water as that station can absorb. So a station that is flat and needs 15 minutes of irrigation, the controller will know that we're not in danger of sending any of that water down the gutter, so we might see all 15 minutes in one cycle. Now, if I bump that slope setting up to a mild slope or a medium slope setting, we're going to still see that same 15 minutes for that station, right? But instead of 15 minutes all at once, it might break that irrigation up into 3 cycles of 5 minutes with a break in between to allow that water to absorb in, right? To allow the first 5 minutes to fully soak in before we come through with another round and keep that water from running off and going down the gutter. And then if we bump that up to a steep slope, we might see that we're going to see that same 15 minutes, right? Because slope doesn't change the runtime at all. But now we might see it with a steep slope. It might be 5 cycles of 3 minutes or 15 cycles of 1 minute, depending on how all of the other settings play out. But it is really focused on pounding that water down into the soil to the right root depth without letting any of the water go down the gutter. Let's see. Can't look at the slides and the questions at the same time. Questions on that? All right. We'll move on. How we doing on time? Boom. We are still on track to be out of here on time. All right, location on slope. This is one of the last ones. This is the last new one. Where on the hill are those sprinklers irrigating, right? A sprinkler head at the top of a hill waters downhill and any runoff goes outside the target area. A sprinkler head at the bottom of a hill waters uphill and any water runs right back into the target area. So a sprinkler head at the top of a hill needs to water a little bit longer than a sprinkler head at the bottom of a hill. So we ask for that detail and make that necessary adjustment as well. And then finally, the last two that we'll talk about are the ones that have their own unique menu on the controller. The percent adjust is definitely the way that I recommend making runtime adjustments on the controller, because this to me is the easiest way for my brain to make sense. But we talked about it in the adjusting your run times in auto mode episode. So we're talking about getting a little bit more or a little bit less out of every program, a few more minutes in a night or a few less minutes in a night. And to accomplish this, I use the percent adjust. And I use that because it works the way that I think it should work, right? If I want more, I +5, +10. If I want a little less, I'm -5 or I'm -10. So there's no remembering the inverse relationship and all of that stuff. It also turns out to be that a 5% adjustment adjusts the runtime about 5%. And so it's very easy to track and I make this the standard by which I adjust all of the stations, just to really dial in the exact amount of water that each station should get. And then last but not least, we have the target MAD. And when we talked about that glass of water underneath the glass or underneath the station, we said that 50% was the maximum allowable depletion. That is by default, but that is something that you can change. I have to be careful when I talk about this because on the episode 14, I said it wrong and I had to revisit it. When you are adjusting the target MAD, the higher you set the target MAD, the lower you let that water level live, right? So if I change this from 50% to 60%, I'm saying I don't want to irrigate when that glass of water is 50% empty. I'm going to let it get to be 60% empty before I irrigate. So we're going to have less frequent irrigation as we work our way up in target MAD, and more frequent irrigation as we get shallower and shallower, right? If I take this from 50 to 40, I'm saying don't irrigate when it gets to be 50%. I want 40%. I want it to get there faster. And so it will increase the frequency with which we irrigate. With this one, I always put out the caution flag. I definitely recommend you stick to that 50%. And if you are adjusting your target MAD, keep it pretty close to 50%. I see it do wacky things when it gets way on the extremes on this setting. So stick to that middle ground and you will be in good shape. All right, so that is the nickel tour. Now I have 3 minutes to do my quick demo and answer whatever questions came up in the question box. First, let's look at that. All right, I think we're still in good shape. If you have questions, now would be a great time. I'm loading up a quick demonstration. What I did here a bunch of times was refer back to previous trainings. So one thing I did want to show you is how to get to those previous trainings. A couple of shortcuts. If you're at weathertrack.net, which is where I kind of live, if you click on that WeatherTrack symbol, that's a quick link to our company homepage, hydropoint.com. And hydropoint.com is full of great information, tech sheets, and frequently asked questions guides. What I want to point you to is here under the resources tab. And at the bottom of the resources tab, you'll find the webinar series. If I click on that webinar series, you can see that our company is offering a whole host of different types of webinars. If you haven't checked those out, they are great. Now, if I go to Smart Water Wednesdays or WeatherTrack Wednesdays, you can see our upcoming seminars. But if I continue to scroll down, I can see watch previous webinars here. And if I click on that, it takes me to the web page where I can select any of the previous episodes that we have been recording over the last weeks and months. So you can go in here and again, check out the adjusting your auto mode runtimes, adjusting your auto mode frequency, or this one that gives you the quick summary of all of them, all the little settings in between. All right, so let's see. Very quick, last chance for questions. All right. Then I will jump back and we will close this guy out right on time. Make sure that if you have more questions, if there's anything that we can do to support you, we are happy to do so. We have a team of customer service agents at the ready. If you have questions in real time, you can call from the field and receive 6-day-a-week bilingual customer support, or email them with any questions, and it's a great resource to get answers to your HydroPoint questions. We also have the online resources at the knowledge base that has task-based articles, as well as all of those resources we talked about before. And then the WeatherTrack training site, hydropoint.learnupon.com, where you can find all the certified training stuff and additional training that we can do, as well as the YouTube channel where I post all the little short videos or stuff that you might need to access in the field. All right, I did get one question. Let's see what that was. Oh, yeah. Did I get one question? I saw something flashing. Oh, it was a chat. Let's see that. All right, so that wasn't a question. It was just a compliment. So thank you, Rick. And let's see, last but not least, join us next week where we will talk about one of the features we haven't discussed yet, the budget monitor, what it is and how to use it. When we talk about water bills and water budgets, this is an invaluable tool for tracking your water use and comparing it to a budget. So we'll walk you through the details of how to do that next week. So until then, thanks guys. See you next week.